Things are happening.
They are. It's interesting with Teams. It takes like 10 seconds to start the recording, but now it's on. So welcome everyone to SQL Friday. This is SQL Friday number 92. And the returning guest today is Ed Pollack. Ed, you are an MVP now.
That has happened, yes.
I thought you were an MVP since forever. But congratulations. It's, well, finally, I would say then.
Thank you.
Ed is going to talk about T-SQL in SQL 2022. So my favorite topic, SQL Server and T-SQL. Welcome. The stage is yours, Ed.
All right, thank you. Nice, short, clean introduction. Thank you, thank you. So this is a fun session because it's all about the new T-SQL, and it's often overlooked. People love talking about shiny new features when it comes to SQL Server, but there's not always the focus on the T-SQL. But to developers and to anybody writing code, this matters a lot because this can make your code more efficient and better and faster and cleaner and easier to read, and it's easy to miss. They add new T-SQL all throughout all the preview releases, and it's very easy to just miss one and then it's gone forever. So this is a great thing to have in your back pocket as a tool. And it's good to see all the new things when they come out and just know, will this be useful to me, not useful to me, or maybe useful to me? And all right. This is me. I've done lots of stuff in the SQL Server community. I speak very frequently. I write a lot. I have a book on indexing coming out in the not too distant future. I'm a data architect. I organize SQL Saturdays and other events, and just I'm busy. It's fun. I enjoy this. It's good. So I do lots of things. And I have a SQL Saturday. I had a SQL Saturday umbrella, as you can see in the picture. I'm gonna save the picture forever though, because I love the SQL Saturday umbrella. I'm gonna make them again in the future at some point and give them out. It's something. I'll find an excuse to give out a SQL Saturday umbrella. All of these slides and SQL from this will be, I'll send them out later. I'll put them onto the meetup and I'll make sure everyone gets them. And if you have any questions during this, feel free to ask questions. I'm assuming that Magnus will take care of the Q&A, or you can save it for the end, whatever you want. And off we go. So this is going to be straightforward. I'm going to provide a brief intro to how new features work, how do we handle versions compatibility levels, because it is very important. If you're not familiar with those parts of how SQL Server work, it's worth a few minutes to talk about because it's really useful. And then really the rest of this is just going to be all the new features and demos, and that's it. It's very straightforward, lots of fun, and questions are welcome along the way. I'll keep the chat open, but I probably won't pay a lot of attention to it. So if somebody asks anything, feel free to just kind of jump in. The key here is that every new feature of SQL Server, even some minor releases and like just incremental pieces, will have new features, new things, lots of new things. In addition to all the shiny stuff that goes into like, Azure Synapse or Postgres or MySQL or other connectivity or whatever that gets all the headlines, there's new T-SQL, new functions, some old ones get improved, and these are really helpful to us. But compatibility level as we know it, that's the kind of the version of SQL Server your database runs under, that's primarily focused on optimization. So when you change your compatibility level, the primary purpose for doing so is to gatekeep how the query optimizer works and how your queries perform. That's the primary purpose of it. Some of the T-SQL and other features will be gatekept by the compatibility level, as I will mention throughout this presentation. But in general, the purpose is behavior and not features. The whole point of it is to make your upgrading process smooth. If you go from SQL Server 2014 to 2022, you're making a bunch of jumps in the way and you don't want things to break, you could simply say, all right, I'm going to upgrade, but keep a 2014 compatibility level, and then I'll just slowly bump myself up as I test and then eventually get there. It just reduces risk. It's a very useful thing. Another random note on new features and compatibility levels is that some things are on-premises only and some are Azure only. Obviously, if you're talking about like servers and resources and things like that, you may not have all of that in Azure, depending if you have a managed instance, for example. And of course, on-prem, anything that's Azure related, you're not going to have because you're on-prem. It's just worth kind of keeping in mind. So let's sneak back over here and just quickly demo how compatibility level works. This is this whole presentation's in SQL Server 2022 RC1, released like 3 weeks ago now, 4 weeks ago. So pretty solid stuff here now. It's been out for like a month. That's great. I can go ahead and set a compatibility level to 2019 150. I can turn on my execution plan if I want, and I can just for reference, I'll leave it off for now. This is a new feature. Is distinct from is a brand new feature introduced in 2022. Even though I'm on 2019 compatibility level, it works. Just an important note that if you're on an older compatibility level, it doesn't mean you can't use new features. I can, for the fun of it, go all the way back to 08R2 compatibility level 100, go back to the dark ages, and I can still run this query. This is really just an important demo to show that not all features are gate kept by compatibility level. And so if you upgrade to a new version, you're going to get a lot of new functionality, even if you don't have that compatibility level up yet. I'm going to put it back to 2022 for now. There we go. And just jump on back. And we'll talk a little bit about this more throughout the presentation. I just wanted a very speedy demo, though, on the fact that things still work even if you're time traveled back a bit on your database. So mentioning it's distinct from, I'll go right into that one. This is new. This is very useful. This is probably one of my top favorites out of 2022, along with maybe greatest and least. But this basically allows you to compare two columns or two values, and you can check them, and null is a thing. So it includes null. Normally, if you say where A doesn't equal B and B happens to have nulls in it, you have an ANSI nulls issue. And so you're forced to say something like, well, do the is null of this column and the is null of this column, or the this equals 5 and is not null, and this is equal to 5 and this is not null. But that's messy. It doesn't look very good, and it may not perform well. Is distinct from and is not distinct from are processed nicely by the optimizer and will give you an efficient execution plan. They're chargeable, basically, and they account for null, so you don't have to worry about null anymore. This is just really worth demoing, I think, immediately, because it's good. Here's our classic problem. I go in and I say, hey, give me a bunch of orders where the person is not 3. This column is nullable. And I put myself at ANSI nulls risk because I can't be sure this is going to behave the way I thought it was going to behave. So we do something like this, right? We say, hey, select star from this table where is null of this 3 is not 3. Now, this will get me what I want, assuming I didn't want null included, or maybe I did want null included. It depends. I have to ensure that I'm doing the right thing here. In this case, I said if it's null, make it a 3. So I'm excluding nulls. The way to do this in 2022 that would be nice is this. What this does is give me all the orders where the person is not 3, and null is distinct from 3. So null is distinct from non-null anything. So if you have a value that's null, you have a nullable column, and you want to take the nulls and put them here and put something else here, you can do that without any special syntax beyond this. So is distinct from 3. Distinct means different. Therefore, I want all the ones that are not 3, including null. Does include null. I'm not going to trick you or me here. On the other hand, here is select from my table where they pick my person ID is not distinct from 3. So not distinct means equal to. And what this means is only return 3, nothing else. Don't include null, don't include anything else. So these are very clean ways to deal with null and getting equal to and not equal to in the world of null. And you can just do it with this one line of syntax here and be done. You don't have to worry about ANSI nulls. It handles it for you regardless of your setting. And again, you can try to tackle it this way. Put an equal there instead and try to tackle it that way. And this will give you back all your 3s, including nulls. But again, this is a little confusing, and it's easy to misread it. I did my note up here wrong. My little comment here, I had a little mistake in it a second ago. I've done this like 4 times this presentation. No one noticed, but now I noticed. And again, it's easy to make mistakes with this because this syntax is confusing and this is simple, and converting from one to the other is kind of nice. So is distinct from is nice. It handles null, and it handles null beautifully and makes null issues go away, which is good. Here's a fun one. I've been asked several times recently, why would anybody want to use an approximate processing function for anything? Why? Why would you do this? Why would you care? And the answer is approximate processing is great when you want a ballpark. You have some chart that you want to give people, a dashboard, and the y-axis goes from 0 to 1 trillion, and your values are like 5 billion. And you don't really care on this giant dashboard if it's 5 billion or 5 billion 1,000 or 5 billion 10,000. It's going to be about the same place. Or you may just want to ballpark. You may want to simply say, hey, I just want to know approximately what something is, order of magnitude. Is it like 100? Is it a million? Is it a billion? Just a very general litmus test. For those sorts of things, approximate processing is wonderful. And SQL Server behind the scenes can take shortcuts that will make it much faster. These do median. So before this, all we really had was approximate count distinct, which is great. Anything that involves sorting is expensive, and median is especially expensive. This is a very expensive thing to do. If you've calculated median in SQL Server before you even had percentile disk and percentile count, you know how expensive median is. It's not pretty. This allows us to do the calculation as an approximate and get back results much faster using much less resources, and your error rate is very good. You're talking like 1 to 2% approximately. So if you're okay with 1 to 2% error, then great, use this, because if you have lots and lots of data you're crunching, this will be faster. We can demo it really fast too, for fun. So here's a query, classic percentile cont, and I've wrote this on out. So I want to get a median basically. Just give me a median of the overall sales amount based on quantity and unit price. Go, and do it by salesperson. I run this, I get back my results, and I can see that, I have pretty consistent medians here across the board for everyone. But I can look at this and think about it and see what I get. I can also run this as an approximate. I'll do them side by side for fun. The syntax is a little different. Just note the syntax is slightly different. So when you write your code, just account for that. But it's out there on Microsoft's Learn website, so you can get what you need from there. So let's run this both ways and see what we get, aside from my server breaking, which it won't. And you can see that when you look at the values, they're very similar, but they are different. We can verify, like, here are the actual medians. It took a little while to calculate. And here are the approximates, which are mostly the same, but a few are off by a little. And again, I accept this. This is part of the, if I use approximate processing, I'm accepting that my answers might be a little bit off, and that's okay. In this case, they're off by 5, they're off by 0.5, they're off by 0.9. So not a lot. I mean, we're talking about less than 1% here, not a huge deal. So if you need to calculate medians, whether you want the actual value out of your data set or an approximate value calculated from the numbers themselves, that's the difference between the cont and the disk. The disk will give you a value, the cont will calculate one in the middle, but regardless of how you want it, if you want a median, you don't want to wait all day, or it's a very expensive process and you can afford a smidgen of error, use this because it's efficient. It's very, very efficient, gives you better speed, less resource usage, and it gets you median, which otherwise can be a very expensive function to use. I'm going to keep on going until somebody stops me. That's just how I roll in life. Here's another fun one. Can you give an estimate on the performance advantage of a prox? SQL Server does not guarantee a savings. Personally, from my experience, I found the savings to be like 2 to 3x. It will vary for you, I promise. In general, the more data you have, the more savings you will see, because SQL Server can benefit from stats and taking some statistical shortcuts along the way to get from point A to point B. So in the same way that sort of you talk about column store indexes being for bigger data, the approximate processing is really meant for bigger data, but you can use it on smaller data. You won't lose anything. It's not going to cost you more, but you won't get the same level of benefit. So it really is meant for the millions and tens of millions of rows, and I want to get a median or a count distinct or something like that. Again, those are my experiences. They may vary for you, but in general, the bigger your data is, the better benefit you will get. All right, here's another fun one. There's a couple of new date functions in SQL Server that I also like. These are favorites of mine. I like this a lot. Date trunk. This is really solving a very specific use case that in the past made us have headaches, especially in the world of analytics, where you're trying to like group by and manage data in kind of pieces where you may not want all of it. This is the sort of thing that used to be annoying and now is easy. Here's how it looks. I can take the current date time and I can truncate it to day. If I do that, I get 10/21/2022. Great, 21st of October, done. I can do it for any date part I want. Day, minute, second, millisecond, quarter, whatever you want, it'll do it for you. The benefit of this is that you can avoid the old style challenge of having to add in casts and converts everywhere. Like if I want to group by some date parts, you can use it if you have a date table available and it makes sense, you can use that. If you don't, it involves usually saying like, well, group by the date, group by the hour, group by the minute, or order by the hour, order by the minute, or I want to take this data and crunch it and then insert the hours, minutes, and seconds as separate columns somewhere for calculations. All of those things were kind of ugly because I had to do all these date parts and converts and casts and things to get what I wanted. You may have to do some really ugly stuff in older versions from like subtracting the hours out of the days and things, and just all of that's ugly. It's yucky. It performs poorly in general, and it's hard to read. For example, I could do something like this. And again, this may not perform magically, but if my current process performs worse, then this is an improvement. And if I can make my code look better, also good. So here I'm just simply saying, hey, take all my orders where the hour is equal to this. So I want every order that occurred in this hour. That's cool. I can do that in one line of where clause now and get back my orders. And I can see that, where is it? They're all in the correct hour. Cool. I can similarly do something like, hey, I want to do a group by the hour, an order by the hour, and do a sum over it. Again, this is outside of this, it would be more complicated and messy. Here I can just do it. It's a great way to do some brute force analytics and not have really big complicated code. There's many other uses for this that I've not presented here. You can certainly think of many probably, but date trunc basically takes whatever your date time value is, and it will chop it down to basically will round it to whatever date part you want, and then off you go. So really useful function, very helpful. The performance of it is wonderful using it, but obviously if you group by it or order by it, it's not going to be chargeable. So you'll pay a price for putting this in the where clause. I may end up incurring index scan to get what I want here. So it's not going to utilize indexes for seeks the way you want it to, but it is fast, and it's faster than a lot of the alternatives. So your performance is pretty much what you get. It's better than the performance you used to get, but I can't promise the performance is going to be so good that you should just make all your code do this. I would definitely test and make sure that if you're putting it in a filter, if you're grouping by it, just make sure you're getting the performance you want, because typically grouping by functions, sticking in a where clause may not be what you want. But alternatively, if you put it up in your select like this, and you want to simply get the hour, minute, second, or whatever out of your date, that will perform beautifully. That performs exactly the way you expect it to, and it's efficient. Thank you for questions. I appreciate them. It's good to know that people are out there. I like that. This is awesome. Feel free to keep asking away, and I'll try to answer when I can. I have like 4 eyes, 2 are over here, 2 are over here. It's only a little bit awkward. I'll be squinty afterwards, but it's cool. Other half of what I just talked about is date trunc. This is a very similar idea to what we just demoed, but what this does will automatically truncate. And you can use this again as, wait a second. Oh gosh, sorry. There's more date math coming soon. I began to read the same slide again. Wow, that was cool. Wow, this is not being recorded, luckily, right? Not being recorded? Ha ha ha. All right, it's being recorded.
I can do edit if you want, but I like mistakes in presentation. It shows people are human.
Don't worry. It's good to be human. It's good to make mistakes. Don't worry about it. So there is more date stuff coming. I don't know what I was just thinking. That was great. It's early for me. It's 6 in the morning here in New York. But whatever. I get up early. It's cool. Bit manipulation is a fun one. These are functions that you may use or you may not use. If you need them and if you use them, this is a gift to you. You will find these unbelievably useful and be very, very happy that Microsoft gave them to you. If you don't use them really, then it's kind of academic in nature. But it's worth demoing them, because if you had to deal with bitmaps and bit arrays and things like that, and trying to pull out of hex values certain bits, this is extremely, extremely useful, and it's totally worth demoing. I'm going to go through each one of these here just to kind of show what they can do. So let's say I have a number 16. I can shift the bits to the left and to the right, and it does exactly what it sounds like. If I shift to the left, I will make my number bigger. I will put more zeros in the end. If I shift to the right, I will chop off bits and make my number smaller. So if I were to, for example, run this here, I can see that I have 16. And if I left shift it by 1, I get 32 because I added the 32 bit in the end. If I left shift it twice, I get 64. So the syntax is left shift, my number, and then how many bits do I want to shift it by. That's it. The syntax for right shift is very, very similar. I take my number and I chop bits off the end and make it smaller. So left shifting and right shifting can make your number basically add zeros on the end or take zeros off. Basically, you're dividing by 2 or multiplying by 2. That's what you're doing. What else do we have? A bit count. Another one that if you don't have it, it's a hassle. I want to know how many ones there are in a number. That's all. I want to know how many ones, how many zeros. So go. For 1 0 0 0 0 16, there's one bit 1 1, and it's a bit count 1. For 15, 1 1 1 1, a bit count is 4 because I have 4 ones, and so on and so forth. Bit count of 1 is 1, bit count of 0 is 0. There you go. So if you need to count the number of bits there are in a number, this is a great way to do it. It's worthy mentioning that negative numbers may not behave the you want. When you throw a negative number into a bitwise function like this, SQL Server is not thinking negative, it's thinking inverse. Therefore, if I do this, you will get back numbers you aren't expecting. Wait, bit count of -1 is 32? So just keep that in mind. If you throw negatives in, you may want to absolute value them first, as opposed to having to take a lesson in inverses, which may or may not be what you wanted. It certainly wasn't what I wanted when I was testing this out. I threw the negative numbers in, didn't get what I expected, got a chuckle out of it, then did this, and then got back what I expected. So if what you want is a raw bit count, and negative means like a negative number, like -5 is -5, 1 1 0, whatever, put the absolutes in there. That'll solve your problem. Here's some more. You have getBit and setBit. These are great functions. They really just give you back a bit value, and that's all. So for example, the number 53 is 1 1 0 1 0 1. If I go ahead and I run this, 1 1 0 1 0 1. So I can get back all the bits. Note that the higher number is the leftmost, most significant bit, whereas the 0 would be your rightmost bit. Your your ones bit. So getBit just simply lets you get out of there your bit. So if you need to know within a bitmap, for example, so you have some big, long, scary bitmap of ones and zeros, and you know that like each one means a certain thing, and you want to pull out a specific bit from the middle somewhere, just simply say get bit 20. You get your 20th bit, you know what it is, and you can pass it on to your application, and life is good. Similarly, I can pass in hex if I want. There's a hex of 53, and I'll get back the same values. It doesn't really care. It understands hex. It's a computer. It can do that. Similarly, setBit will let you set a bit. I didn't really explain much just now, did I? But setBit will basically take, and if you give it a bit, it will turn into a 1. If it's already a 1, it stays a 1. If it's a 0, it becomes a 1. So for the example here, that was the worst explanation ever. SetBit, it sets bits. Gosh. Good times in SQL land. So for this example here, I can show that in 53, the third bit is currently 0. If I do a setBit of bit 3, I now get the result. So setBit actually returns the number after you have modified the bit. So I've now taken the third bit in 53, and I've turned it from a 0 to a 1, and now I have 61 instead of 53. And I can just do the silly person test of do the get bit of the set bit, and yes, I can confirm it's a 1. So setBit lets you adjust a bit to a 1. So again, if you're working in the bitmap world or a hex world, we need to adjust bits and say, I'm turning a feature on, I'm turning a feature off, I'm enabling a thing over here, whatever. You can simply set a bit to 1, and it becomes a 1, and you're done. And there you go. So you can set and get to basically go through and do what you need to do with bits within a number. Again, this is the sort of stuff that you will use if you need it. You have a question, Magnus?
Yeah, or more like a comment.
Sure.
What I meant is the unset bit, because I think set bit can only turn a bit into 1 or keep it a 1.
That is a great question. Well, let's test it right now live, because live demos are hilarious. Let's test the 5th bit of 53.
Yeah.
So we're going to get the bit. I love live demo. It's so reckless. It's so reckless and fun. I love it. So let's do it. All right. So this is already a 1. And so I go ahead and I set it and still 53. So is there an unset bit? And the answer is, I do not know of one. Do you know if there's one?
I don't think there is, because as far as I know, there is no third like parameter to set bit.
That is a great comment. And honestly, I hadn't thought about it. And so my feedback now to Microsoft is going to be, you made a set bit, What if I want to make it 0? And that's a fine question. So I'm going to go ahead and make a comment here like that. And what if I want to mistype things? What if you want 0? Then what the hell? All right. That's a great comment and a great question, something to think about and see if they're going to add that in or if they simply overlooked it. But great question, great live demo. I appreciate it. Nothing broke. Yeah. Awesome. But again, thank you. Bit manipulation is a great thing if you need it. If you don't need it, bit offset. Set bit with a bit offset, bit value. Let's test that. All right. So somebody gave me the syntax that I need potentially. All right. Let's try this again. So what if we do this? Bam. Look at that. The crowd helped us out here. Thank you, Alexander. You've answered the question I didn't have an answer to when I prepared this presentation. And now I have a new demo. I'm going to Control S and save this forever. Thanks to you. Look at that. This is beautiful. I'm learning things too. This is wonderful. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right. This isn't really T-SQL, but I'm mentioning it here because it's valuable. Is there a way to get more than one bit at once? I guess the answer would be to have multiple selects. There isn't a way to pull out multiples at once without doing other syntax. But get bit and set bit, they simply return or get a single bit at a time. So you don't have the ability to get more than one at once, but you can pull more than one bit out if you want, or sum them together if you want separately. But these functions are meant to set and return bits. So by default, they don't give you what you want, but they are pretty cool. All right, that was fun. I love unexpected things. That's great. This isn't really T-SQL, but it's worth mentioning. You can do resumable adds and alters now. Everyone's laughing now. This is hilarious. I love it. We're having fun. Fun is good. We don't want to just talk for an hour and not have questions and have fun. This should be enjoyable. It really should be. Thank you. Thanks for enjoyment. This is great. All right. I'm never going to get anywhere. I'm going to be here for the next half hour stuck on the slide. This is great. In general, resumable adds and alters are awesome. They let you pause and resume index rebuilds, which if a very large index or a very customized index maintenance process is very valuable. You have the ability now to do it on a few more things that you couldn't do them on before. I'm going to attempt to demo this here. My success rate has been 100% so far. That does not mean it's going to stay 100%. The thing you can resume now that you couldn't resume before were primary keys. So like if you have a clustered primary key and you wanted to resume and pause, you couldn't do that before. So I'm going to alter this table here, and I'm going to put on a PK, online resumable, max duration 15. So I'm setting some cool settings onto here, and this is pretty well documented. It's not a new feature resumable, but it's new for this. And it's cool because I can now resume a PK, which is often a clustered index, which is something we typically care a lot about not being too fragmented. So I'm just going to put a whole bunch of data in. I'm going to create a new window off to the side. I'm going to put in a pause. This is where everyone gets to laugh at me as I try to do this over and over. All right. We're going to now do a rebuild. Max duration 15, resumable on. I'm going to do it. Hey, I think it worked. All right. Cool. So my index rebuild was paused. Let's see if this happened the way I wanted it to. It did. Cool. I got a crazy error message. I will probably at some point provide feedback. I didn't do it last time as to why that error message is insane, but they can do better. So I paused my rebuild. Now, in the past, before 2022, you could not rebuild a clustered PK. It just didn't work. You couldn't do it. It said, no, it's a constraint. You can't do that. Now you can do it. And as a bonus, if you need to, you can go into sys.index resumable operations, and you can take a peek in there. And you can see, hey, here are the operations that are available in here. And I can look at them. I can make decisions based on them. I can resume them later based on this information stored here. And obviously, your index will drift over time. There'll be more work to do. But for a very, very large index, you know, the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of rows, and it takes hours to rebuild, this is great because it's not all changing all the time. You're probably keeping most of it the same and a teeny bit changing. I can now, whenever I'm ready, it's 2 a.m. tomorrow. It's a nice maintenance period. No one's using my database or whatever, or there's less load. I can hit resume, and it's done. And now I can go ahead and just verify, like, hey, look, it's done. I did it. And I did a live demo of a pause, and for the first time, it worked on the first try. I thinking every time I've done this before, it took like 2 or 3 tries. I would like F5, F5, and I was too slow, and everyone laughed at me. But not this time. You already got to laugh at me, so it's cool.
That's why it's early in the morning. You're more alert in the morning.
That is true for me, by the way. I will completely admit I'm an early person. For some of you, they might find that offensive. Some of you may love that. I wake up at like 4 a.m. every day. So right now it's about 6:30 over here where I live. So this is like prime time for me. I'm awake. I'm aware. I haven't even had coffee yet. But anyway, let's keep charging forward because we have more good stuff here in 2022, and this is a lot of fun. These are really useful functions. For many people, this may be one of the most useful things that comes out of 2022 in the T-SQL world, greatest and least. This solves the problem where you had a bunch of values, and we know what min and max do. Min says give the minimum value for a column of all the values that are in your group, and max says give the maximum value out of a group. So you can say give me the max of this column, the min of this column, the average of this column, and that was always great. But it only worked on one column. And the question everyone always asked was, hey, what if I have 3 columns and I want the largest of those 3 values? What do you do? And the answer before now was messy. The answer was, I will do some case statement and say case when A is greater than B, then A. When B is greater than C, then B. When A is greater than C, then blah, 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 blah. You'll do some horrible T-SQL to ultimately get what you want, or you'd have some view or function or computed column. You do something basically to give you what you wanted, but the something was messy and annoying and you didn't really like it. And what's beautiful about greatest and least is you can toss in as many values as it wants. You don't have to just do 2 values, like give me the greatest of A and B. You can do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. In fact, I put this here as a note. You can do as many as you want. The limit's 254. If you have 254 columns and a greatest or a least, I will applaud you for doing something I never thought anybody would do, and probably Microsoft didn't think you would do either, but 254 is the limit in case you're curious. You can toss in here columns or expressions. You don't have to just put a column name in. You can put in other stuff inside of this. You can have other calculations, math, whatever you want. You can put aggregates in here. You can aggregate them. So this is a very, very flexible function that allows you to get the greatest or the least of multiple columns. The only note worth making about this, kind of the errata that's worth mentioning, whatever, whatever. It will implicitly, like all functions that you have where you do like an is null or a coalesce or whatever, it will implicitly convert. So if you give it 2 different data types, it will convert based on Microsoft's internal conversion algorithms. If you want to know the order of precedence, just Google Microsoft data type order of precedence, and you get back their table that shows you the highest and least. This is important if you have like date and date time or, decimals and ints. If you aggregate them all together, the data type that comes out may not be the one that came in, so you may just want to take note of that. All right, what does this look like? This is a very common problem, or I want to basically say, hey, I want a last modified date, for example, and I have a whole bunch of dates. How do I get my last modified date when I have like 4 dates? How do I do that? Or similarly, if I were at the first date that something has happened, like my earliest activity date on an entity, normally it's a little annoying to get. I have to do some computed column or some function or something ugly to go in there and grab each one and do a greater and least against each to get what I want. And of course, if null is involved, you've got to deal with null now. These do handle null nicely and ignore it the way you want it to. It will not assume that null is less than 0, that null is greater than 5, because that doesn't actually make sense, and we know that. So if I run this, I can see here I made a last modified time, which is the greatest of a pick time, last edited time, completed time, last edited when, of 2 different tables. So I can put different table columns in here too. I can say give me the greatest of 4 different columns and call it my last modified time. So now I know for each order line here, my last modified time. Similarly, I have a least here, and I can do the same thing. I can get my earliest activity time, my first modified date. These are really powerful functions. They take things that used to be ugly and expensive, hard to read, and they make them into a single line of T-SQL. So if you've had this problem in the past, I've had this problem in the past, probably many of you have too, where you simply wanted to say, here's a bunch of values. They can be scalars, they can be columns, they can be computations, and I want you to give back to me the greatest or the least of them. Give me the highest value, the lowest value. Not max or min, those only work on a single column or expression, but a bunch of columns. This does it for you and does it really well. All right, this is a great one. I love this. I'm glad they added this.
How are these guys doing with optimization, greatest and least?
Their optimization will be about as well as you would expect it to be. It's better than what you used to have. So if it's in your select clause, then you're simply just paying the price of selecting the columns. So for example, this greatest here pulls 4 columns. So the performance is going to be the same as if I had done a bunch of math on 4 columns. If you plop this in your where clause, if you plop it into anything like a group by or whatever, it's going to perform about as well as you think it would. And that is, it'll perform as well as if you would throw in a function with 4 columns in it in your where clause. So it doesn't perform magically well in a filter, but it'll perform better than what you did before. And if what you did before was some indexed computed column or a view or something like that, this will certainly perform better than that. But there's no magic. This won't perform better than getting 4 columns. There's no magic in there. There's no secret sauce, so to speak. This is not a performance enhancement. It's really a T-SQL enhancement to make your big, ugly T-SQL into a nice, compact, neat T-SQL. The performance side of me wishes everything performed better when you added new things. It isn't always the case, but I will say that neater, cleaner, easier to read code has many benefits that probably will include performance as well as a tangential benefit. Good question, though. Everybody always asks, how does it perform? It's like when somebody asks, like, oh, you want to propose something. What's it going to cost? How much my tax dollar is going to go up, right? Everyone always asks questions like that as a default because we care about performance, and I totally understand. So here's one that changed a bit in 2022. String split's been around for a while. It's a very useful function. When it was added, I was a very happy person because it made all the old XML and string parsing, dynamic SQL stuff that I used to do go away. And that was beautiful. So it's been around for a while, but a new parameter was added that is useful enough that it's worth mentioning, and that's ordinal. And what this does is it gives you a location in a list, and you can actually use it as a filter. So if you have a comma-separated list of values, let's say your list has 10 values separated by commas or whatever, it will add a number to each one. So your first value is given 1 as the ordinal, second value 2, third 3, fourth 4, and so on and so forth. So when you turn your string into a table, you now have numbered rows that are unique. And that could be really useful because it'll be in the order the string came in. So if you just need a PK there for whatever reason, like you just need an auto-incrementing number, you'll get it and you can use it. If you want the ordering, something to order by, you can do that too. So this provides really 2 things that weren't available previously. As a quick demo of string split, because if you haven't used it before, you're not very familiar with it, I'll just demo it quickly and then I'll do the new thing. If I have a string here with a bunch of stuff in it separated by commas, I can simply say string split, my big long string, and delimit it by comma, and I'll get back a table. It just uses value as the name. I get back a table, frog 17, Pikachu, whatever, and there you go. If I do that by space instead of comma, I'll get back a weird set of values, but they make sense because I delimited by space. So this is your delimiter. It can be anything. It could be the letter Q. It doesn't matter, but it's there. I can do something crazy like this. I can cross-apply, some XML or JSON or something to get out values if I want. So you can do some pretty crazy stuff with string split if you want, or not. We're here for the new stuff, though. Here's the new stuff. I can go in and I can say string split my string, and then I want to order by ordinal. So what's going to happen here is it's going to give me back the ordinal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, and I'll get it back in order. So I now have a nice little auto-numbered PK for me over here for my string split values. This is really useful. I can then plop this in a table. I can form functions against this. I can run queries against it. This is kind of like a nice, neat table with a number in it. So, this may not be a unique list of values. I could have, frog 14 times in here. And if I do, splitting that may be confusing. Now I have that value appear multiple times in the list. But now that I have an ordinal here, I can know that, well, this is the first one. That's the 8th one. That's the millionth one, whatever. As a note, I can't put 0 in here this parameter here at the end that you note, this ordinal one, is either 1 or 0. So my syntax for string split is my string and a delimiter. The additional parameter that's optional is a 0 or a 1, but it's not a 0. You actually only have a 1. It's kind of a trick. You put a 1 here, it enables using ordinal. You can't put a 0. This actually throws an error. If I do that, it'll say invalid column name. You can't do that. Doesn't make any sense. So all this really is the enable ordinal bit. If you enable it, you can use it. If you leave it off, you don't use it, and that's it. There's no 2 or 3 or 4 here. There isn't a increment the ordinal by 5. That isn't here yet. Similarly, I can't, if I don't put that bit in and I don't set it to 1, then it's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. It's going to return an error message. So I said return the ordinal, order by ordinal, but I left off the 1 here, and therefore it doesn't work. You can do cool things like this too, though. If I want to use the ordinal, I can get every third value like this. I could just say, hey, give me all the values where the ordinal %3 is 0. This is bitwise math, kind of. Give me all of the ones divisible by 3. And I get back 3 and 6. So if you wanted all the odd numbers, the even numbers, the ones that are the thirds, the fifths, the tenths, if you want a sample of them, a random sample, you can do that. So ordinal has a lot of value here. You can use it just like a column, basically. So you can group by it, order by it, filter by it, do crazy math on it. All yours. So this is a pretty useful add that lets your string split get more useful. You can do more with it than before. A lot of new functionality. Are there any questions about string split or anything else I talked about, but I've moved so fast you haven't had the chance to ask any questions?
I have, I'm trying to get my camera on first here. One comment from me, because I've seen people use string split before SQL 22, and they use row number to get the ordinal, and it kind of works, but it's not guaranteed to be in the correct order. And for some applications, you really need to process the items in the correct order. So let's say you run an accounting system and you get data in, it has to be in the right order, because otherwise you break something. So I really, when this helps, it helps quite a lot, because the alternative is ugly. If you really need the ordinal to be guaranteed, you had to do it kind of in a loop, recursive CTE approach or something.
That is a great point. That's a great point that what we used to have to do to make this happen was ugly, and it performed poorly. Thank you. And I just noticed my camera is off. I'm not sure if it's been off for a long time. It may have been, so I apologize. It was not my intention, but here's my beautiful basement. Enjoy. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Here we are. All right. Here's another one. This is the other date function that I alluded to earlier when I just kind of went off on a fun tangent, is date bucket. So this is kind of like date trunk, but what it does is it will automatically bucketize your dates and plop them in. So if you basically want to group by a date, that used to be kind of annoying, because what you had to do, let's say you wanted to group by hour. I want, excuse me, you want to take all of your date times and you want to get them truncated down to the hour and then bucketize them. So like all the ones that occurred at 3 a.m. on October 20th of 2022, I want them all in one group. That was kind of annoying because you had to group by date, hour, minute, whatever, to get what you wanted. But that wasn't very clean. It didn't look very good. It was hard to read. This gives us the ability to do it automatically. So what does date bucket do? Here's a demo of it to kind of just show what it does. You pass into it your date part, a number, that I'll explain in a sec, and then your date time or your date or whatever. So what basically happens is you will take your date time, you will round it down to the hour, but then you're going to bucketize it. You can do more than one, sorry. You can do more than 1 hour here. So this here will say, hey, I'm going to chop it down to 8:29. It's 1,700 hours. There it is. But I could put a 2 here, and that'll mean that I'll bucketize it into groups of 2 hours. In this case, it'll start at 4 instead of 5 p.m. or 1,600 instead of 1,700, and it'll bucketize them that way. This is really meant for grouping or for analytics, where you want to simply say, I want to drop all my dates into a bucket of hours, every 4 hours, every day, every quarter, every week, whatever. You can pass any of those in as date parts, any date part that works normally, and get back out what I want. If I bucketize by minute, it'll bring it down to the minute. So it's kind of like date trunk, but I can add this additional number in here to create a time-based bucket. Every 1 hour, every 2 hour, I could do every 8 hours if I wanted. And then when I do this, it'll bring it back to the 8 hours. In this case, it's the same. But then as I move forward through future hours, they'll bucketize appropriately. So this is a great way to create time spans that you want to group your data by. Similarly, you could do something like this. I can select from a table instead of a scalar, and I can say, all right, I want to take my expected delivery date and bucketize it by the week. And I can look through here and see that, yeah, this started at the beginning of my data set and just began bucketizing it by week. This does it every 2 weeks. So if you care about 2 weeks, you can do it every 2 weeks as well. This is really, really like do it by month, do it by whatever you want. You can do it by every 54 milliseconds. So it could be useful in maintenance and performance optimization if you want to like understand where things performance-wise fit or how often things happen, maybe. I haven't thought of all the uses for this yet. So odds are very good you've thought of uses I haven't, and that's great. But it really is a great way to group your data. Now, if you put this into a group by or a where clause, it'll perform as well as reading all of the values that you have to read. Again, there's no magic here, because you're going to ask about performance, right? I know you're going to ask. Performs as well as you expect it to, but it's very clean. And the alternatives to this in the past were very, very messy. If I wanted to bucketize by every 8 hours in the past, what did you do? Well, you might have to do bucketize by the date and then do some greater thans or less thans or some like date diffs to like get out what you want or date adds. And all of those things were kind of yucky. They didn't really perform well. They certainly didn't look good. If you're a developer trying to understand code that somebody else wrote years ago, you don't want to see that. You want to see this. This is way cleaner. And I think that the biggest functionality provided today by a lot of these new features is cleaner, tighter, easier to read code. It will probably perform better as well, only because you're doing less things to get where you have to get. But it'll certainly be cleaner and easier to read. And that's a big deal.
It's pretty cool. Also, there's a fourth parameter, which is kind of the reference date. What's the beginning of time? So for a company doing reporting on odd dates, let's say you start the year on July 16th, which is perfectly normal for a Swedish company. It's like your accountant tells you don't put 1st of January because I'm super busy at that time. Register your company to have its and fiscal year starting some other date. Then you can just set that fiscal date as the reference to start the reporting as the fourth parameter, which I think is pretty cool too.
That is a great ad, and I should have demoed it here, and I didn't demo it here, so next time I will. But thank you. And as a side note to that, which is important, your first day of the week at like SQL Server setting that determines is the first day of the week for you Sunday or Monday, because depending where you are in the world, might be one of the either. This will honor that. So if you have SQL Server already set up to use Monday as the first date, it'll do that. I'm assuming the parameter you're mentioning would override that. So I would probably want to verify that, but I'm assuming it would override that because specific usually overrides general. If you do date bucket, day of week, and your SQL Service configures makes Sunday as the first day of the week, because I'm here in New York, but then I travel somewhere else where Monday is the first day of the week. If I told it as the fourth parameter Monday, I think it would use that as a specific over the general, but I will test that and let you know what happens. I'll come back with that later as feedback because that could be interesting. This is a lot. These things are fun because they're newish enough right now. Like SQL Server 2022 is not even out yet. It probably won't be RTM for on the order of like a month or two maybe-ish. I'm just guessing wildly. We're talking not in the too far future, but it's still new. Things are changing. So because they're changing, new things happen. So this is kind of fun. It also means that I didn't catch everything, which is pretty human as well, and that's cool. So I'm sure by like the year 2026, this presentation will be perfect by 2026. Yes. All right. More new stuff that's fun. Generate series. This is kind of cool, actually. It's kind of like the sequence idea, but there's less overhead. You simply say generate. It's like a numbers table. You want a numbers table. Classically, you have to like put into a CTE, put into a temp table, put into a numbers table, then use it. This will do it for you and it performs very well. So basically, this is a way to generate a series of numbers in tabular format with whatever parameters you want. This does require the new compatibility level. Again, I said that most things aren't gate kept, but some things are. Sometimes it requires optimizer features that are only available in the new version. That's the case here. So if you use this, you just got to have the new compatibility level, and if you do, you're good. What does this look like? Well, it has some parameters. I'll show what they are. So what this basically says is I want to create a series, start at 1, end at 17, increment by 1. It's pretty familiar syntax. It isn't too weird. And I get back a table, a numbers table from 1 to 17. Similarly, I can adjust my numbers and say, I want to go from 100 to 250, increment by 10. This is great if you need a left join reference numbers table. This is great if you need an axis for analytics. Like I need an axis that has all the values that I made left join to display my values. Very useful. If you need to have all the nulls denulled in a series, you can do that as well. Similarly, I don't have to only use ints. If you have a reason, and there are reasons out there to use decimals, you can. For example, let's say I want to get all decimals percentiles from 0 to 1. I could do generate series, start at 0, end at 1, and then increment by 0.01. You can do that, and I'll get back my 101 values from 0 to 1. So if I care about percents or percentiles, or I want to do like 1 to 100 or something like that, if you have basically some set span you want to cover, you can. And so there's really no limitations here. You can put any decimals you want in, any numbers, integers, tiny ints, whatever, and then spit back out whatever you want based on your incremental value. This is very versatile. This really ultimately takes the place of a numbers table. If you don't have one and you don't want to use one, this is a nice convenient way to do it, especially if this is like a one-off. You're going to generate some one-off series. You're going to use it one time for a very specific report and then never use it again. I'd rather do this than create a permanent thing somewhere. And it performs nicely. This performs really well because a lot of the number table schemas you might find out there involve like CTEs and row numbers and recursion, and they might perform decently, but they won't perform as well as this.
The question,
go ahead.
Is there a limit on the length of the series? Is a question from Joseph.
I do not know. I did not see one documented. I'll put it there. I did check for that. I didn't see a documentation for it, which of course means that here's my chance to see what happens. Ah, look at that. It has to be an int. All right. That's like a billion, right? So the answer is this parameter is an integer. I'm going to stop this now before something bad happens live. I don't know. What did I get to? I got to like 200. I got to like 2.6 million. That's great. So the answer is yes. We just figured it out just now. Second parameter is an int. Therefore, I assume the first parameter is also an int, and the last one is probably also an int. We can, play with that a bit and just see. Hey, look at that. So I can see some value in what you just asked. I just wanted to go to a billion, but I wanted to increment by a million. So there is value here, and that was fun to test. Thank you. Good question. And we answered it for ourselves live because it wasn't in the documentation yet. Maybe, well, it probably is documented that it's an integer actually, and I just, overlooked it because data type didn't mean much to me. But there we go. Good question. We answered it and provided some limitations as well. And I didn't break my server. That was cool. All right, I got a few more things here, and I don't want to go over on time. This went much longer than last time I did it. That's fine. I love questions. Thank you. I'm not going to demo these. JSON's the sort of thing in SQL Server where either you use it or you don't. If you use it, this is awesome. If it's not useful to you, then you're just shrugging right now, waiting for me to move on. Basically, these functions allow you to do things like check to see, is your JSON valid? That's pretty useful. If you want to know if it's valid or not, you can check with a function now as opposed to either trusting it or validating it elsewhere. You can check to see if a certain path inside of the string exists. You can create an object from a set of expressions, and you can do a whole bunch of building of array text. Again, if you use JSON, this will mean something to you, and you will find this useful. If you do not, this means less to you, which is why I'm not really going to demo it. It's very much an edge case, but I mention it here because it's here. So if you use JSON, your eyes are lighting up, and that's great. If not, then I'll go on to the next one. But I simply put that there for completeness. You may or may not need it, and if not, then no problem. The final thing I want to demo here today is window. This is a new feature of the kind of how window functions work in SQL Server, and it allows you to basically clean up your code a bit. This is 100% a developer clean up your code, make your T-SQL better. It is not an optimization feature. In general, window functions that repeat the same window over and over will share the window and try to reuse it if it can, assuming it's identical. If it's not identical, it won't. But really what this is meant for is to avoid typos. It does require the new compatibility level to work, and at 100% is worth demoing. So here is something I may have done in the past. I would have a row number, I'd have a count, I'd have a max, and in the olden days, I would simply put those into the window and it would be there. And I would have as many as I need. I would have row number over, partition by whatever, order by whatever, count over, partition by no order by, max over, order by partition, blah, 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 blah. What window does is it lets you have a common window function right here and then reuse it up here. So I named this customer window and then I plopped it up here. What this really just does is it cleans up your code. It also means that if you have multiple windows you're working with and you want to specify which is which, you're less likely to make a mistake. You're also less likely to succumb to copy-paste errors, typographical errors, things like that. So this is really meant to be a convenience for you to make your code cleaner and shorter. That is the, what's this? There's a big statement here about generate series. I'll come back to that at the end, but that's very useful. I'm going to read it. So for window, this is a convenience to you. It makes your code shorter, cleaner, and better. It's not going to perform well. It's not going to perform better than before. This is not an optimization. You're not going to somehow have more efficient partition by or order by. It's still going to do the work. But I now have nice short T-SQL instead of big T-SQL. I lied. I have one more. That's okay because it's a good one. First value and last value is another aggregate function that will help you get data you need without having to do the hard thing. So if you have a big, long, if you have a column full of data, and you can do min and max, but this is a window function. You can use this as a window function, first value and last value. So you have a window, you want the first and the last, not necessarily the min and the max, simply the first one in your window and the last one in your window, ordered by whatever it is. It's possible that your order by may differ from this. You may want the first value of X when you're ordering by Y, or the first value of Z when you order by X. And the order is simply based off your window and nothing else. I'm going to use window here for fun because I keep adding more. I've added a lot to this presentation. Gosh. So I have my row number, count, max. I have a first value and a last value. And all this is really saying is that I'm ordering by this ID here, but I'm getting the first and last value for this. It's a very, very useful function. And it can be a huge time saver because before, you could do messy things in older versions of SQL Server like subqueries. And I would say, oh, select the min of this column from the table where this equals this, blah, 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 blah. And that is horribly messy. Nobody wants to do that. It performs horribly. This will now take advantage of your window to get what you want, and you only have to do your window once. So if I were to turn on my execution plan and run this, I get it back. There's a lot going on here, but I noticed I only scanned my table once. And that's the key here. It took a lot of other gunky gunk here to get all of these things calculated over my window. But the single scan is key because in the olden days, if I had multiple complicated things I was doing, subqueries and all that, I'd have multiple scans, and that's expensive. Are we out of time yet, or are we good? How are we looking?
We are, well, at the end of the scheduled time. I'm in no hurry at all. So
all right.
For me, it's okay if you continue.
I've been adding something new to this pretty much every few weeks for a while, and therefore I'm going to just keep going, and I'll finish in a sec. I don't want to waste time, so I'm going to kind of hurry this on. This is added in RC0. Trim, rtrim, and ltrim have new arguments. I'm simply going to demo them just to show they're here, and you can use them. So there's this new parameter added called leading, trailing, or both. What that pretty much does is allows you to take trim and tell it, what do I want to, what did I do to myself here? Ed, why is my code not working? This worked before. Let's just pull this out for a second. All right. Well, that is not what I expected. This has worked recently. I'm on the wrong RC. I bet I'm on the wrong RC, and this is my fault. Yeah, I did it to myself. I've got to upgrade my local SQL server to the newest RC, so it won't work, but I'll explain it, and then we'll all get a chuckle. This is what happens when you're working 3 different computers, is these things happen. We're on RC1 right now. This was added in the last RC. Oops. So what this basically does is it'll say, hey, I want to remove the leading A's from a string, or the trailing A's, or both. So you can specify what you want to remove from a string and take it off of there. Traditionally, trim removed one or the other. You could use ltrim and rtrim, but there's a benefit here in just using a single function and being able to specify what it is you want to pull off of it. So it's just some new syntax. It's not groundbreaking, but it is new and it's worth mentioning. But since we are at the end of our time, I do want to wrap up. I don't want to take any more. This did go longer than expected, which is good, I guess. We had a lot of content and questions. Thank you. So the real wrap up here is that SQL Server 2022 added a lot of new stuff, a lot of new T-SQL. These are the sorts of things that if you blink, you might miss it. And they're really useful. Things like greatest or least, or the bitwise operators, or the window. This can make your code far better, cleaner, more efficient, and faster. So if you think you can use these, if you've used the hacks and workarounds in the past, please use this because it is better. There's lots of great functionality here that you can use that'll make your life easier. So it's yours. It'll be out there soon, RTM. Enjoy. This is our chance for questions and wrap up. So questions and wrap up. Here we go.
I did put in a comment about the generate series because you always have to try things and try to break things. It does accept big int, but it has no overloads for implicit conversions. So you need to specify all 3 parameters as big ints if you want to use big int. So you'll cast the 1 to a big int if you want to start by 1 and so on. So I guess in that case, since you can use numeric, I guess 38 digits is the max, which is a big number.
So if you want to generate a series in the trillions or quadrillions, you can do that. That is pretty cool. Well, thanks for doing some digging there for me. I wasn't going to go on to Microsoft's Learn website while I'm in the presentation. It's a little awkward. Hey, everyone, let me Google this for you right now. But thank you. That is a great piece of information to add in the future. So it's supported, but you got to cast it explicitly because it won't implicitly do it for you, which is good to know. And surprising as well, since they usually do the implicit stuff for you. But that's cool.
Yeah, and there was some other function that Daniel Hutmacher mentioned on Twitter the other day, that something that you really expected to have an overload, some date function which has been around forever, where there were no overloads, so you get strange errors because of it.
I wouldn't be surprised at all, but again, thanks. I hope everyone enjoyed this. It's new stuff, therefore it's kind of wonky. Things go right and wrong. We learn new things as we go along. So I appreciate the patience and the laughs and the questions along the way. This will get polished over time better, obviously, but it's new. So new things are fun. We're playing with new stuff, and I do enjoy that.
I enjoyed it too. I mean, I don't think you didn't make that many mistakes. I used myself as a reference, and it's not as fun if everything just runs smoothly, because then every session is the same. So
that is true, and I appreciate questions and interaction too. That makes things more interesting. If everyone's quiet for an hour, we're bored, but we would never allow that here. Not on Friday.
Never. No, it's Friday. It's time for the first beer soon. So not for you, maybe. It's early in the morning, so.
That's okay. I have a long day ahead of me, but that's fine. That's fine. I've always actually joked that a lot of the events you host are convenient because of the time zone. Because for everyone else in America, this is too early, but for me, it's perfect.
Yeah, and mentioning the time, next week we're gonna have Mala on, who is gonna teach us to detect basically T-SQL code smells using script DOM or anti-patterns. That's the only time when SQL Friday is not starting at noon Central European time. We pushed it 3 hours, so to give her time to sleep, basically. So for people on here, if you're going to join next week, it's going to be 3 o'clock Central European time and not 12. Ed, I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Seattle. I think
In
I'll
person.
game night too.
That'll be awesome. I can't wait.
Which I'm gonna stop the recording before we start revealing personal details here.
Probably true. Probably true. I'll
Recording. Stop. Okay.